Hey there, welcome back. So it's Louisa Tanner-Munson from Feel Good Astrology, and I'm here to talk about the full moon in Virgo later on in the month of February. Now, I have already done some forecasts for the month ahead, which you can already watch. There's also the new moon that we're having on the 9th. And so what I want to do in this video is really sort of understand how these energies have all kind of come to fruition, and what we're learning at the time of this full moon. Now, full moons are a moment where we often feel quite stressed. We often feel very full of whatever is going on in our life. You know, are we sick to the, are we sick of something? Have we bitten off more than we can chew? There's so many different ways that things can get on top of us. So yeah, it's very interesting to take a look at this new moon and also to realize, also what we might want to let go of. It's a little bit like birthing, a pregnant belly can get only so big before we have to release the energy. And I really think the full moon has a lot of that going on for it. So let's bring on this full moon now and start to unravel its planetary secrets. So I've got it in front of me and I've blown it up because when I'm looking on the screen, I need to bring it up much more. My eyesight's changing. So anyway, I'm based in a UK time zone. I'm based in Portugal, Europe. Now this is happening at 12:30 UK time on the 24th of February. Obviously, if you're listening to this from a different area, if you go to www.timeanddate.com, go to the sun and moon tab and then down to moon phases, it will give you the time of this full moon in your time zone in case you want to use it to light a candle, do some kind of intentional work with it, say a prayer, really focus your energy, however you want to do this. Essentially, how a full moon looks on a birth chart is, you've got the sun at one end and you've got the moon exactly 180 degrees away. So they are working, if you think of it like a cosmic seesaw, on the one hand, you've got the sun representing your personality, your ego, what's very apparent about you. And then the moon, which is very much about your psychic energies, your intuition, your psyche, your insecurities, whereas the moon looks like your stronger side. Your sun looks like the stronger, more male side. The moon is your sort of infinite yin, your deeply feminine and more reticent side. So it's like there is these two sides within us absolutely not working in collaboration at all at the time of the full moon. It's a time where we feel separated, feel pulled apart, and a bit like if you're pulling an elastic band or a rubber band, you can only pull it so far before it breaks and rips apart, it shears apart and causes all sorts of pain when you snap your fingers with it. But it feels a bit like that in our personalities, in our personas. It feels like we can only hold this energy of separation, of opposition so long before we're going to snap, explode, or feel that kind of straw that broke the camel's back. So, what is the coding of this? Well, I've written down all the things that I really see going on and highlighted these two because these, I think, are really critical. This one in particular, I've spoken about quite a lot in the February forecast because the sun is in a conjunction with Mercury and Saturn at the time of this full moon. Now, it's not exactly in a conjunction with Mercury. It's 3 degrees away, and it's 4 degrees between the sun and Saturn. But in the subsequent days from the full moon, we get a much tighter conjunction. And on the 28th, the sun and Saturn come together, creating a whole new Sun-Saturn cycle for the year ahead. So it's quite a serious time. We've got like the Sun, Saturn, and Mercury all in the first decan, the first 10 degrees of Pisces. Now, Saturn's not very comfortable in the sign of Pisces, but Saturn is quite stern, really wants to ground, create stability, create rules and regulations. He wants to manage things. And so if you think of the sign of Pisces, we're talking about intuition, we're talking about expansiveness, emotions, imagination, and lots of very difficult to define concepts. So Saturn's really got his work cut out here. And if you want to know more about Saturn in Pisces, I've created a video about that. If you go to the Saturn playlist, you'll find it, and that will explore it, in much greater detail. But that energy is coming in, and with the Sun and Mercury on it, it's like we are thinking and needing to acknowledge our need for discipline in our lives. But we realize that we're needing creative discipline. We don't need like hard and fast discipline and a smack wrist. We're looking for a compassionate way of disciplining ourselves, or a compassionate way of managing ourselves. Like, how can we make our life work for us whilst not killing ourselves with rules and regulations? It feels like there has to be another way of existing. So we're looking very much at ourselves from a place of determination, self-management, and maybe how that when we're organized, we can actually achieve more of our creative desires, that we might actually be able to go further, in finding that balance. We're not too much this, we're not too much that. Now, the moon in funnily enough, there's similar themes with the moon in Virgo, because the moon represents the sort of imaginative, dreamy, intuitive side of us. And Virgo, of all the signs, is very much about getting organized, managing, self-managing, being cautious, being careful, being practical. So funnily enough, the two sets of energies balance each other out quite well. What I notice about this is the overall theme is, how do I get more conscious about the patterns I'm playing that might weaken me? How can I adult myself a bit more effectively? And how can this happen without me feeling like I'm losing my joy? Both Virgo and Pisces are also mutable signs, which are very much at service to others. Traditionally, if you think of, Virgo's the 6th sign of the zodiac and Pisces is the 12th sign. So there's this idea of health versus mental health, which the 6th and the 12th really encompass. So yeah, we not only are we thinking about self-management and making ourselves a bit stronger, but we might also be applying that to having a healthy body and also a healthy mind. And obviously, if you've got a healthy body, the chances are your mind will be quite strong too. But if your mind goes, your body goes quite quickly. So it's an interesting one, isn't it? About getting the balance right and knowing where to start. And probably I would start with the body first. But again, if your mind's not there to help you, they're both going into like, what I'm really thinking here is the yin yang, where there is no right and there is no wrong. And there's always a spot of the other in each other's side. It's like, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? Do you look to create a lovely, clean body or a clean mind? Actually, we probably need to do them both at the same time. So I really do see this idea of cleanliness and self-discipline as being strong drivers at the time of this full moon. Now, we've also got the Sun, Moon and Pallas Athena, which is one of my asteroids I've used, in a T-square. Now, Pallas Athena is an interesting one because she's an astrologer's asteroid for starters. And so Pallas Athena often shows up very strongly in the charts of astrologers. And anyone, in fact, that likes patterns and likes looking at strategy and creative solutions. She has a lot of foresight and she's a warrior. She is very strategic, very wise and kind of solemn. And she notices patterns. She doesn't let a pattern go, past her. She notices all patterns coming up from the past and potential patterns in the future. And, it's almost like she's always recalculating things. So people with a strong Pallas, could also be really good traders and mathematicians and scientists and things. They are looking at patterns. And she's also very good at languages, because obviously language is a series of codes. So, at this time, she's also getting in on the act. Now, T-squares can sometimes feel a little bit difficult because you've got two energies sort of in opposition to each other, working in separate ways. And then you've got something that is also frustrating one side and also frustrating the other. It feels like there's nowhere to go there. So what I see here is, yes, we want to clean up one side of our life and also clean up another side of our life. Which one do we start at? And the whole idea of observing the patterns almost takes you further into the problem rather than helping you out. So for instance, if you're looking at your health and your mental health, you might be noticing, yes, when I eat and drink this happens. And then because this happens, I then eat and drink more of this. And so it could actually become more of a self-fulfilling prophecy than this moment of realization where you go, oh my God, yes. But you can resolve T-squares, and it's usually because of a mutual planet that everything is also connecting to. Now, one thing that I do see as a release point for this very strong tension is we've got this sextile energy to Jupiter, which is also in a trine energy to the moon. So the moon trine Jupiter, and also the sun sextile Jupiter, I think is a moment of hope. You know, it's giving us encouragement. You know, Jupiter is very much about hope and I don't want to say gentleness, because Jupiter can be quite rough and tumble, but there's a lot of forgiveness there. You know, Jupiter is wanting, it's an energy that wants to work with others. It's an energy that wants to light a light under each other's, that wants to expand. It's warm-hearted. It's not cold. So I would say in resolving the energies of the full moon, you need to absolutely be ready to forgive yourself and others, and maybe even forgive, like, for instance, something like the Ho'oponopono, which I always struggle to say, but I've managed to say it now. But the Ho'oponopono prayer, you know, the I love you. Hang on. I love you. I'm sorry. I love you. Please forgive me and thank you. And I may well have got those in the wrong order. But the whole idea of looking at everything in life, even things that you can't quite understand, even things that appear to have harmed you, you know, it's the whole idea that actually we're all in this cosmic dance together. And whilst we're in this place of opposition and taking positions, we'll never find peace. And so the whole idea of the Ho'oponopono is to forgive, like give the sense of completion, give the sense of thanks and gratitude for the part that everyone, and also every thought, every deed, every food type and drink, if that's what your problem is, every exercise, every ailment, every, you know, it could just be that you bless everything in your life that's not working out, and also bless everything that is working out as a way of lubricating the wheels and getting things moving again. You know, this idea of hope and optimism and prayer, because Jupiter is also, if you think Jupiter's the ruler of Sagittarius, which is the ninth sign of the zodiac, the ninth sign is very much, and the ninth house is very much about religion and faith and spirituality. So prayer absolutely comes into it. So for instance, you know, anything, anywhere where you are, and obviously I don't want to talk about one religion over another, because I know I have people watching from all different backgrounds and belief systems, and I want to keep this as inclusive as possible, because the idea of grace and opening up to the sort of perfection of God energy, from my perspective, is a lovely thing to chat about and to stand for in this video. So yeah, I would say our natural sense of hope and faith are really, really strong at the time of this full moon to get things moving and to get us back into our alignment. And so by getting us back into our alignment, we might want to listen to the word of faith, or whatever faith conjures up for us. Is it the voice of God for those who hear God talk to them, or Jesus talk to them, or whoever their God or guru is? Or, you know, is it the voice of you and your inner knowing, your higher self, your inner self? Who knows? But it's that guiding light that exists within every one of us somewhere, if we dig deep enough to find it. So I really see that this lovely Jupiter position, which is connecting with Mercury and the Sun and Saturn in a sextile, and also is in a lovely trine with the Moon, is super duper helpful, really helpful. Now, we've also got the energy of Venus square Jupiter and Mars square Jupiter. So although Jupiter is giving us that faith to move on and to have a sense of optimism and hope, and a sense of, I would say, a sense of adventure as well. There's also the square to Venus and Mars. Now, again, I mentioned this in the new moon episode. Jupiter in his squares can send us a bit over the top with things, you know, because his energy to expand can really inflame situations. So, you know, Jupiter in a square to Venus can make us a little bit more possessive, and a little bit too gung-ho in our relationships. We might be over the top affectionate, only then to retract our affection very quickly if we feel like we've gone too far. So that can create a bit of instability, but it definitely does give us that sense of an overabundance of emotion, and feeling in particular. And then the square between Jupiter and Mars, we can take action very, very quickly. You know, we can in that moment feel absolutely powered up. This is what I'm going to do. This is what I have to do. And we're very male, and we're really sort of like, again, gung-ho, taking action because we're fired up, and we're also feeling quite optimistic and a bit foolhardy is probably a word. And I use this kind of, I notice as I'm saying this, I've actually got my Mars and Jupiter very much in a hard square in my chart. So I know this feeling very much, you know, where you feel so fired up to take action, you take it, and then afterwards you go, oh crikey, why wasn't I listening to myself? Where were the signs? Why didn't I check myself a little bit better? So yeah, at the time of the full moon, I would say use it as an encouragement to bring out the most magnificent aspects of yourself, and where you feel really drawn to take action, passionate action and loving feeling action, but it's almost you're feeling it too much. Where you're feeling it too much, you might just want to check yourself a little bit before, especially with Mars and Venus together, you could be like launching yourself into an emotional, sexual tryst of some sort. You know, you want to really check yourself before you actually take action. Make sure it is actually going in the direction that you want it to the best of your abilities. Now, at this time, we've also just a week before, Chiron and the North Node have come into that sort of fulcrum point, that absolute connection. But that was with the true node, and you know, some people follow the mean North Node, not the true node. They're two mathematical equations, and it's up to you which one you do. But I would say Chiron and the North Node are absolutely in the middle of their conjunction. So we are feeling, we are very sensitive to feeling that sense of isolation, you know, that we get when we notice that we might be hurt about something and don't quite know how to get beyond it. So that might also be playing into our desperate need to connect. So it's worth checking that you're connecting with people because of mutual joy, not because of a feeling that you're missing out, which is the wrong reason, really. You know, I would just ensure that, you know, in the interactions you're moving towards, make sure you're coming from the absolute best motivations that you can. Because if you're moving towards something because you're feeling the lack of something and the sort of abandonment of something, that energy is going to be underpinning any interactions that you have. And so whether it's consciously seen or expressed in your words, it's felt at a psychic level. And you know, it's almost, I always think, and it's, I say this knowing that I've done this over and over again in my own life, but I think with these things where we go into new interactions before we've resolved what's really going on in our psyche, it often spells disaster. And it might not happen immediately, but you might find you're dating somebody for 3 or 4 weeks, only then to find out that you've got crossed wires. So, you know, from the perspective of future heartbreak, I just really urge at the time of this full moon, we get as conscious as we can of what we're triggered by, what's really hurting us. Because the week before, with the Chiron North Node conjunction, and in fact throughout pretty much the whole of February, we've really been tested about how we feel about things and where we feel vulnerable. And the sooner we can like face it and look at it and examine it and start to release it, the easier it gets. And so, you know, if you want to explore that in the February forecast that I've provided in a different video, I have broken that down on a ascendant by ascendant basis. So I do talk about that for your star sign or your ascendant sign. And then if you wanted to look at the bigger meaning of the Chiron North Node pattern in your chart over a much longer period from one conjunction to the next, which is in 14 years, 8 months time, I explore the bigger power of that in the Chiron North Node forecast, which is another video. So if this part of this full moon discussion is really capturing your attention, it's worth checking those out too. The last thing that I absolutely love about this full moon, and it would be remiss of me not to talk about it, is this lovely moon Jupiter Ceres grand trine. Now there's Jupiter and there's the moon, and they're connecting to Ceres. Now Ceres, also known as Demeter, she's the earth goddess. She's like Mother Earth. Okay, she's not Gaia. Gaia is Uranus's wife in mythology, but Ceres, she's the goddess that keeps things working on Earth. She's in charge of all the patterns, all the cycles. She's the mother of Persephone, who becomes Pluto's or Hades' wife. She loses her to the underworld. But Ceres is about the natural care and nurturing that we offer each other, and very much about the cycles of life. Now, when she lost her daughter to Hades, it's a whole other story, and I've spoken about it in different videos, but basically her daughter stays half her year underground with her husband and half her year above ground with her mother. And it shows the cycles of birth and death, and grief and joy. So when Persephone is above ground with her mum Ceres, you know, Ceres is managing the energies of birth, and so you've got spring and summer as things are coming up and flowering and looking abundant. So there's abundance, there's this feeling of joy and connection. And then every year at the time when Persephone must go back down, we get autumn, you know, coming up to this time as Ceres starts to grieve the potential loss of her daughter, and then the grief and desolation that is winter. And so Ceres really shows us the natural cycles of life. And so here with the moon and Ceres, which are both also images of the mum in our birth chart, you know, we're connected with Jupiter. So I think during this time, any mums in your life, any friends who are mums, anyone that offers you the mum energy, even if it's not your own mum, you might have an adopted mum, like a mother from a different sister or something. You know, the mum energy is really, and you might be a mum. And let's not sort of exclude the dads, you know, because Ceres is an image of parenting and nurturing and doing it well. So I do think at this time of the full moon, we can also aspire to something much greater. And that is that we can be the hopeful parent to ourselves and to the people around us, that we can support each other, we can nurture each other, and we can do it with a sense of faith or a sense of, I don't know, the sense of this is just the right thing to do and this is how it is. But yeah, there is that lovely sense of the perfection of parenting, because again, although I said the moon does represent the mum in birth charts, it also represents the child as well. So we've also got like parent and child and hope. And, you know, you might also see it as a holy trinity. So there's this lovely sort of balance to this full moon as well. I guess you could say, because this, when you add in the sun as well, you've actually got a lovely kite. So it's like, yes, we've got this full moon and we do need to take better care of ourselves, and yet we could give ourselves over to a bigger power, the energy of being looked after, which some people say exists. Some people really feel it in a very, very strong and palpable way. So yeah, I see this very much as an emblem of faith and renewal and hope. So let's have a quick deeper look and see what asteroids show up. There's 3 that have been selected because they are absolutely really, really up close and personal. Now, when I was looking at the new moon, I spoke about Orpheus, who was the god of enchantment and music, and who married Eurydice, who is the wood nymph who died. Now, Eurydice is actually one of the asteroids. She is in a conjunction with the sun, and you've also got Hidalgo, and you've also got Requiem. Now, Hidalgo's down here, and Requiem and Eurydice is up here. So let's just understand their meanings now. Eurydice is a mythological asteroid. Now, Requiem, you've got the idea here of grant them eternal rest, O Lord, mass for the dead, remembrance and music. So Requiem, we've got this idea of a music that celebrates the lives of people. There's the idea of granting eternal rest to people, and it's like a mass. So it's an interesting that we've got Requiem, very, very tightly in a conjunction with the sun at the time of the full moon, if you want to pay attention to it. So are we becoming aware of people in our lives passing away? Are we becoming aware of the cycle of birth, life and death and the effects it's taking? Are we grateful for people in our lives? I don't know how this is playing out exactly. We've also got Eurydice, who's the wood nymph who died of a snake bite. And in the new moon episode, I described how she died of a snake bite, and her husband Orpheus tried to win her back from the underworld, but he couldn't quite trust the situation, so it didn't happen. So she almost had a chance at life and then died. Well, she had a chance to come back, but she didn't. So there's the idea of a sudden death, by a snake bite, or suddenly being taken and not being able to come back. And then Hidalgo, it's not a mythological asteroid, but it's the name of Miguel Hidalgo, the priest and leader in Mexico. He was known as the father of Mexican independence. So he helped, or he called for ending colonialism and led Mexico to independence. So he is a symbol of independence and freedom. The idea that we don't need to be tightly managed by some external authority, but that we can find our own authority. So this is also an interesting little twist. Now, again, if we don't look for this, we don't see this. I've only found these asteroids because I just check them out against any new moon, equinox, solstice, etc. I always like to just see what else is playing in, because the more I look into it, the more I realize that the coding of the asteroids and everything just tells such a big story. And it's always kind of interesting when those stories start to play out. But anyway, Hidalgo, the idea of independence, the idea of saying, no, I'm okay. I don't need that care. I don't need that pastoralism. I don't need to be controlled. I want to find and forge my own future, is here playing into this square. He's also in a conjunction with Pallas Athena, which, as I said earlier, is the vision of cool, calm strategy and seeing patterns and noticing patterns and then saying, no, I'm going to be independent on this. So that's an interesting thing to notice about the time of the full moon. So I wonder what is going to be going on around the time of the full moon, which just happens after this Chiron North Node conjunction. Who knows? But interestingly, these two asteroids both have something to do with death and dying, or the idea of people being lost and the idea of remembering. So what is coming up? During the Chiron North Node video that I recorded last week, I did notice that the last time Chiron and the North Node came together in their eternal cycle was when they were in a square in March 2020, which is obviously the time when the COVID phenomenon started in earnest. And when I trace the cycle back of Chiron and the North Node, it often correlates, and I listed quite a few of them, and you can check them, using things like on this day and doing historical searches on Google. But I checked back 4 different, I went back in time for every time Chiron and the North Node came together. And there's a whole rash of different levels of death and dying, or noticing death or shock in the world. So I do think there's an emblem of that going on. But again, I don't want to talk about it in such a way that everyone starts saying this is going to happen, and then we all start creating that. It's more to make us aware of the fragility of life, and whether we want to be more in gratitude to it and just notice things. Notice what's happening around us. I'm not sharing this to become part of the problem more. I'm sharing this to raise awareness for people to make their own decisions about what's going on in the world. So yeah, I'd be very interested to see what narratives are being spun in the world around the time of the full moon. And I would also urge you to not go into the panic of whatever is being spun. Because it's one thing I noticed is that during the last conjunction between Chiron and the North Node, it so happened to coincide with the Olympic Games, and there was no news at all. So I do think that news is quite purposefully spun in this world that we live in. So yeah, worth bearing that in mind. But anyway, I think that's enough suggestions and ideas from me in terms of the full moon. Suffice to say, it is quite an emotional one, and it's on the tail end of the Chiron North Node conjunction, so it's likely to just pull you at the time of it. So if you are somebody who feels that they get really pulled by the full moon, be aware of it in advance and have some kind of super sense to kind of tai chi it out of your reality. Work with the energy so that it doesn't pull you into its vortex. Anyway, lots of love to you wherever you are in the world. If I can be of any help with anything, then just give me a shout. My email address is louisatannemunson@gmail.com. You can see it below. My website, which I've currently broken, is being put back together at the moment, but it will be and is www.feelgoodastrology.com. But anyway, I'm open to readings from mid-February. So if you are interested, drop me a line and I'll get you booked in. But anyway, lots and lots of love to you. Take care. Bye for now.